Welcome to Book Watch, the podcast where pages meet screens. I'm your host, Sarah-Daye. Each week, I'll be joined by amazing guests to dive deep into the world of adaptations, comparing beloved books with their cinematic counterparts. From faithful retellings to bold reimaginings, we'll break down what worked, what didn't, and what made each adaptation unforgettable. Whether you're a bookworm, a movie buff, or both, you are in the right place. So grab your bookmark, grab your popcorn, and let's watch some books. Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Book Watch. Megan is joining me again to talk about the key plot points of the Duke and I / the Netflix adaptation Bridgerton Season 1. Megan, welcome back.
Hi.
Someone has a lot to say and is excited.
It's one of my favorite book series. And shall we say not one of my favorite TV series.
Do you like it, though, as a drama?
Yeah, if I separate myself from the books completely, then I think that it's a very well-made show.
Okay, good to know. But let's get into it. So we, both book and show, we kind of open up introducing ourselves to, well, actually, no, that's a lie. The show, we're introduced right away to the Bridgertons. In the book, we're introduced to the Duke first with this whole prologue. So we get all of his backstory in this prologue, whereas in the show, we're getting these flashbacks throughout the entire season.
Right. I did notice that towards the end of the season, we didn't have the the second half of the season didn't really have any flashbacks. So then when it went back to him not being able to speak when he was a child, I was like, almost like I had forgotten, or the show had forgotten, that that's a huge part of all of this. And I wonder if that was intentional because they were trying to have the audience be very understanding of Daphne's confusion about why the Duke was doing what he was doing. So that would be my guess. But as an audience member, it felt jarring when she had that realization that he couldn't speak when he was younger, because it was almost like, okay, but like they shouldn't have mentioned it at all, and then we should have found out along with Daphne about that, rather than having it be in the heavy in the first half of the season and then not mentioned at all, and then all of a sudden it's brought back in the last episode. So to me, that seemed strange for them to do it that way, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that it's because they wanted us to be kind of wrapped up in the confusion.
I agree that that's why they did it. But in the book, we don't really come back to it again until Daphne discovers it in the book as well. So, but it is different because we're given that all in the prologue, and then it's fed to us little by little in the show.
Well, and also the book is so much shorter. It's a much more condensed story, that with the show being so much more expanded, which that's not an issue by itself, I don't think. That never happens. It's usually that a bunch of stuff is cut out in the show or in the movie. But I think because the book was so much more condensed, then if it wasn't visited for a while in the book, it's like, well, it doesn't really matter because you're reading it for 2 days or whatever. Whereas the TV show takes place apparently over so much more time. It seems like it takes so much longer. So maybe that's why it felt more jarring and strange for them to like take some time off of the childhood stuff and then bring it back.
Right. And we're going to get into all of that added storylines in a little bit. But let's go back to the show introducing the Bridgertons versus how the book introduces the Bridgertons, because the books are very much just, this particular one is just all about Daphne, whereas in the show, and like I said, we'll get into the added storylines, but we get to know a lot of the other Bridgertons a lot more than we do in the book. And we open up the show with them all right before she's going to be introduced to the queen, and we kind of get this just chaotic family dynamic.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I like that they are creating more dimension for the characters. I don't think that anything was wrong with the way that the books portrayed the family, but I do like what the show was trying to do. Um, I'm always a fan of like more character development and building out the characters more. But again, which we'll get into, there were so many things that they added in for all of the siblings that to me changed their character rather
Mm,
than keeping the same personalities that all of the siblings had or the children had that were in the books, and then expanding on the various storylines in ways that wouldn't modify the characters. But for me, so like showing more stuff that the characters were going through, or just showing them on the screen more than on the page, that's fine. But they changed so much that it's like, well, okay. It's like, I don't know. It to me, it felt like I get what they were going for and I like the ideas. And we'll talk more about the side plots and stuff. And I like those. But it just was like, to me, it was just too jumbled. Like they were doing too
mhm.
much stuff, and they were also changing all of the personalities of all of the main characters. And I'm like, well, all right. I feel like they had a goal and they had like good ideas, but then they went way too far with it and changed too much, in
Sure.
my opinion, where the dynamics were different.
Sure. So, moving on off from the Bridgertons, because I know we're getting into the conversation about all of the added subplots, but we're introduced to Daphne and Simon. And the whole kind of first half of the season is about their deal. And then the second half of the season, and just like the book, the first half and the second half is their relationship, basically. But going back, what were your thoughts on how they introduced Simon in the show and kind of all of this added diamond of the season? Because that's not even a thing in the books.
Right. I thought it was stupid that they added the whole diamond of the season stuff. And but I didn't mind how they introduced the Duke. I think that, as usual, the show has a more dramatized version of the Duke being the biggest rake or whatever. Like that sort of thing is mentioned in the book, but it just seems a lot more lighthearted, and like Daphne doesn't take it as seriously almost. Whereas in
Mhm.
the show, it is like the biggest deal on the planet how much of a rake he is. And then, yeah, the diamond of the season. I remember the first time that I watched that and I was just like, here we go. Like another thing, another screen moment of like a pretty, like petite little girl being like chosen by the queen as like, and it's like, well, obviously she's chose like that. It was not, it was so, it felt so typical or contrived. Like, yeah, she's from like one of the most popular affluent families in the area, and everybody knows them and everybody loves them. So it, okay, if she's chosen as the diamond of the season, it's not like it would be it's like if they were trying to go that route for some reason, they should have had like Penelope be the
Right.
diamond of the season, because then that would have been like right off the bat, making everybody be like, oh, okay, there was a choice that was made that people weren't expecting, which is the whole
Mhm.
point of making that part of the storyline. But having Daphne be the diamond of the season was like, we don't need her to be the diamond of the season because she's beautiful. Um, she's the firstborn daughter in this family that everybody knows and loves, and they have all of the money. She doesn't need this title or anything. So it just felt like an eye roll to put it in, because it felt like it added nothing to her
Well, and it
character and to
almost
the family.
cheapens his decision
Yeah.
to work with her because now
Yes.
she has this title,
Mhm.
whereas in the book, she's just a Bridgerton, which is still it means something to be a Bridgerton, and it's the little sister of his best friend, but it's her. Like he wants to have this deal with her because he was intrigued by her.
Mhm.
But in the show, it's like, well, I'm the Duke, you're the Diamond. It makes sense for us to be together. So
Right.
it just kind of cheapens that decision on his part.
Yes. And their relationship in general, which I'm sure we'll get into, is so not believable to me. Like their chemistry is so not believable in the first half of the season, I think. And I think that that would have been helped. I mean, I think that there's multiple factors in that, but I think one of the things that would have helped is exactly what we're talking about, where they immediately set Daphne up to be the diamond and then him as a duke. And it's like, okay. But then at the same time, they're still trying to include the plot of her not being desired enough by anybody to be proposed to. And it's like, well, which one is it? Because if the queen is
Right.
going to choose her as a diamond and you guys are going to put that into the show when she's already from one of the richest families and she's beautiful and all of that, but she's not desirable, but now the duke wants her, but they're keep like it to me, it just doesn't. They're trying to be able to have all of the aspects of the plot and they don't fit like that. The
Mhm.
book, it
And they
fits.
kind of correct me if I'm wrong. Is this not in the book that Anthony kind of
Antony.
meddles? Anthony kind of meddles. Thank you for correcting me. Meddles in the relationships and like turns them away in the show. Does that happen in the book?
I oh my god, you'd think that I would remember this after reading it multiple times. I don't think, not to the extent that this happens. Oh my god. Okay, readers, you're going to have to write in and correct us. Um I don't it's definitely not what's in the show. I know
Mhm.
that it's like so dramatized in the show and it's such a huge deal, and they're like arguing about Daphne and Antony are arguing about it, and it's like such a huge thing, and I know that it's not a huge thing in the show.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I
Before we
think that the point is that Daphne is like, she's just a really like fun, lighthearted,
Yes.
jokester type of person,
Right, and then
type
she's,
of
like,
woman.
friends with them in the book, and that's why she's
Yes.
not being seen romantically is because she's buddies.
Right. And so again, they're trying to have every single plot point added, but they don't match that way. Like they don't all
Mm,
make a
very
cohesive thread.
contradictory, yeah.
Yes.
Before we move on to the garden scene, which fuels the duel, let's talk about the queen because this whole diamond of the season being her choice is added, but the queen herself, of course, is a queen in the books, but as a character that we
Mhm.
see and get to know, that was added in the show. Now, as me being, I've seen all the seasons and only read the first book, I've seen Queen Charlotte, loved the Queen Charlotte show. What are your thoughts on having Queen Charlotte be such a prominent character in this series?
I think it's a great addition. I think that they did a really good job with it, aside from the diamond of the season thing. Because, in my opinion, pretty much all of the other ways that they have added her in has not taken away or modified the other characters, which is
Mm,
that's my biggest issue with this adaptation is that the characters are like 100% different from how they are represented in the books. And so I think that the addition of Queen Charlotte is simply that. It's just an addition. It's not something that massively changes the dynamics of what goes on, except for the diamond of the season thing is weird. So
mhm,
once we got past that, and then it was gone. It was like she was a diamond of the season, and then we forgot about it after one or two episodes or whatever. And so I was like, why did you even add that in
mhm.
there? But anyways, otherwise I like adding her in. Whistle down.
The second part of this character and what she's adds to the show is figuring out who Lady Whistledown is, and that again that's just a little piece of the book. Like every chapter opens with a Lady Whistledown
Mhm.
note. Um, So what did you think of this whole mystery and discovering who and don't spoil it me because I don't know if
Yeah.
they reveal who she is in the books like they do in the show. But how do you feel about this whole the queen working with one of the Bridgertons to kind of discover who she is?
I like it mostly because, again, I don't think it takes away from the characters and the personalities and the dynamics. I do think that there is a point where, and it's not necessarily because of the queen working with Eloise to try to find the mystery or whatever. It's not necessarily because of that, but I do feel like the intense mystery and investigation that they demonstrate does what pretty much all of the other scenes do, which is over dramatize everything. But I think that surprisingly, that part of the adaptation doesn't actually detract from like overall the personality dynamics. So I don't have too much of an issue with it. I think it makes it
That's
kind of fun.
great.
I think they do a good
Yeah,
job
it
of making
does.
it like a mystery and investigative and stuff.
Right. And when you turn something like this book into a show, you're going to have to add something because you've said it's such a short novel that
Hmm.
you need to add some sort of story arc. So I
I
thought it was
think
really fun and I like the character in general.
Well, and I really, really, really like Eloise, and I like most of what they've done with her in the show. There are things again that I feel like enhance parts of the her character that don't need to be enhanced. It's like they do a little bit of
Mhm.
stuff that's like just to make it more dramatic. So I don't have too much of an issue with her being the one who like works with the queen to try to figure out the mystery because I think they did it mostly fine. But they could have done the same thing as far as having the queen work with a character to investigate to make it kind of like more mysterious and more fun for us in the audience and not use one of the Bridgerton characters. And then that
Mhm.
way they're adding stuff to the overall plot and they're, expanding on these other characters, but they're not like the Bridgertons have already been written about. We already have their
Right.
stories. So we don't need to keep adding and modifying stuff with them. Like it would be, I think, like why not have I don't know. We see the what's her name? The modiste Delacour?
Mm.
No, something whatever
Yeah.
it is. Maybe I'm mixing her up with Fleur Delacour from Harry Potter, but whatever the French modiste is. Um we see more of her and I think that that's perfect because we don't see a ton of her in the book and she's like a perfect side character where we see her enough that she's relevant, but her plot point doesn't necessarily matter for the Bridgertons unless they like mix it up with the Bridgertons. So like having her work with the queen, something like that would be perfect because it's like two characters that are relevant, but they're side characters. So they're not taking away from or changing the main characters. So I feel like
Mhm.
something like that might have been a safer choice, but I don't think that they did the Bridgertons
They
dirty or
didn't botch
anything
it.
by adding them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was
And
fine.
the character is called Madame Genevieve Delacroix.
Oh, I was so close.
You were so close. Okay, so let's move on to well, do you want to talk about the deal at all and like kind of what happens throughout the deal and them the
Yes,
chemistry kind of growing?
I think it was so bad. I think that they did a really bad job with it. And I like to see the best in people and I like to give people the benefit of the doubt and I like to try to keep a positive attitude, but I think they did a bad job. I don't think that their chemistry is believable at the beginning. I think that after they're married, I think that their chemistry is more believable
Do you think
and
that
what
it's
they go
an
through.
actor problem or writing directing problem?
Maybe both. I do feel like it's both. I don't particularly like I'm sorry I forget her name, the actress who played Daphne. I don't think that she was the right choice for this role. I think I've said this in the last episode. She looks like a Daphne, like the person named Daphne, but she does not embody the character of how the book was written at
Right.
all.
Mhm.
And so I already take issue with that. Um but I do like her more in the second half of the show. And I think that so maybe it that is a writing directing issue with the first half versus the second half. And so maybe I don't know.
Mhm.
But I don't think that their chemistry is very believable, but I think a big part of that is because they changed so much about the characters, especially Daphne. And they made her so much less lighthearted and fun and so in my
Yeah,
opinion so
she's
much less
very
likable.
serious in the show. Mhm.
Yeah, and so it's just not like them coming up with a deal feels like that was a plot point that was handed to the writers and they just like went with it because that was handed to them,
Mhm.
not here's a plot point, how do we actually create the dynamic and create the feelings and the chemistry around it. It was like they just were like, well, this is what we have to write, and they just put it just doesn't feel believable to me. So
Yeah. I
think it was
agree.
dumb. I think it was dumb. They just shouldn't have added it, if they're going to do a bad job with that. Because the deal like doesn't even to me it doesn't even make sense because it doesn't feel like that's a part of the overall plot. Really. If you like step back and look at the whole season, it feels so forgettable that they made a deal,
Yeah.
you know. I don't know. So I think that they just shouldn't have even added it in if they're going to change all
And
this other
something
stuff.
that was really shocking to me was that I thought, not knowing anything about Bridgerton, I thought the entire season was going to be about this deal, and then they get together at the end of the
Yes.
season based on the
Yeah.
trailers. And then so
Yes.
when they got together and the garden scene and the duel and everything happened like mid-season, and then the second half is all about their relationship and then the having kids issue. I was very shocked at that. The
Yeah.
previews did not express any part of that. It was all about their deal and their relationship blooming.
Which I feel like maybe that's because that was such a big deal in the book. And the book does feel very much like it's split into two parts essentially. But to me it flows better at least, and it makes
I think it
it
flows
feels
much
more
better.
it feels more cohesive. And so yes, there are like two main aspects to what's going on with their whole relationship. But again, it's like they wanted this season so badly to be about the deal because that's like the big thing in the book. That's like the initial point of the book.
Right.
And so they like acted like that was going to be the biggest thing. And then it just felt like such a forgettable plot point because it wasn't believable and they didn't make it connect with anything else.
Yes. Yeah. However, they do make this deal. They end up falling for each
Despite
other.
everything we said, they still make a deal.
And they have an intimate moment in the garden. And correct me, does
Woo!
that happen in the book? I don't remember. Or is
Yeah.
it
Oh my
that
god.
just the show? Right,
I'm
it
so
does.
bad. I just reread this. Just reread this because we were recording this and I'm like already forgetting.
So there's music, there's heat, and Anthony walks in on them after what's the character's name that is trying to hit on her and she punches him?
Nigel.
Nigel. And so they move from the Nigel scene into the garden scene, and then Anthony finds them. That is how it happens in the show. How did that change, or what is your opinion on how that changed from the book?
I wonder what I'm going to say. They dramatized it
Of
so
course, yes.
much and made it so intense. Um, what I do like is that the concept of demonstrating that women are so often pursued by men in a non-consensual way, and men take it as the opportunity to continue chasing and to try to convince because they feel like women should be owned by them. um and I'm speaking as modern times. So I do like the idea that we see that that's like a serious thing, not
Mhm.
that I think men who might be doing that are going to be watching this show and learning a lesson from it, so it's probably falling on deaf ears. But so I like that concept, but I have to like really struggle to like think about just that as the concept that they're demonstrating, because as usual they make this garden scene this incredibly dramatic, intense, like negative thing,
Mm.
whereas they blended two scenes from the book into this one garden scene, which I wouldn't have an issue with if they weren't like the show is so much more expanded than the book. So it's interesting that they would condense something into one scene when the rest of the show is like adding in all of this stuff that isn't in the book. So it's like, why would you condense this? And so what happens for the first part of it with Nigel and Daphne is that they're at a ball or, event or whatever. And then he follows her like into the hallway and she punches him, but she feels really like immediately bad about it. Like the way that it's written in the book is really comical and lighthearted.
Mhm.
And um Daphne doesn't seem to really feel threatened. I mean, she feels threatened enough that she hits him, but it's more like, it's almost like she did it as a reaction just to like say,
Yes.
stop talking to me, rather than like her life is genuinely threatened, or like she's about to, he's about to do something really bad to her. So the book, I'm in general, Julia Quinn, all of her books are very, very lighthearted, and she can write about a relatively serious scene and
Mhm.
have it be kind of fun and comical. So that changes. And then that's when in the book, Simon and Daphne interact because she punches Nigel, and Simon is watching the whole time, like waiting to see if he needs to step into her rescue. And they
Mhm.
hadn't interacted before. And then he sees that happen, and then he's like, well, I was gonna I was gonna help you. And then they start talking, and they start joking, and they're quipping, and it's really fun. Their banter is so good, and their chemistry is so good in the book, and it makes sense then what will happen later, which is them making the deal, and then their relationship starting to blossom, and they start to have their attraction towards each other. That flows really well in the book. And then so they do the hallway Nigel punch, start quipping and talking, and then that's like right away when Daphne says that she, isn't able to find a suitor, and then the Duke says that he can't have children, but he wants the fussy mamas to be off of his back, and so then that's when they come up with the deal, and it again feels really lighthearted and fun in the show. And then they have then their attraction starts. So then they have the garden scene, and then Antony sees them in the garden and gets mad and says, which is, for this time period, understandable that he would be like, you
Mhm.
have to marry her because, God forbid a woman be kissed, and not have her life be ruined. So then that happens. And then we move on to the rest of the stuff that happens after. So it just feels really dramatized and intense in the show, and there's like a
Tense is
lot
a good
of
word.
beating people up that's not really happening in the book, and so that's how those scenes differ.
Yeah, and I agree. A tense is a really good word from their shared experience, Simon and Daphne, the beating up, and then we that leads us into the duel. And we can move on to the duel and the forced proposal because Antony says, you have to marry her or we're going to have a deal. And he's refusing to marry her. We know it's because he doesn't want to put Daphne in this position because he knows she wants to have the kids and the big family like she's a part of. And he does not want to have kids. Um, and so he doesn't want to put her in the predicament, which is really sweet and noble. But then he's in this predicament where he is willing to die for that. And she just does not understand because she doesn't understand that he can't have kids or doesn't want to have kids. And we'll get into that in a little bit. And she stops the duel and convinces him to agree to marry her. And then that's when we kind of go into our second half and we have a whole new set of dynamics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as usual, the show makes like the duel scene like so dramatic. Which, to be fair, it is a duel where they're trying to kill each other, but it's so it to me it feels really cringy to watch in the show,
Mhm.
especially after reading the books. Because I believe I watched, now I can't remember because this felt like years ago. It was years ago. I think I watched the first season and then read the book and then read the rest of the books before season 2 came out. I'm pretty sure. Um, and after reading the books and then watching the duel scene, it just feels really cringy to me because it's like really, really dramatic. But the show is supposed to be a drama. So
Mhm.
I think
Yep.
that for what they were going for, it worked, unfortunately. Um, but I mean, and also Daphne like riding her horse into the middle of where
Yes.
they're shooting. I'm just like, girl, you are not smart.
That's actually the reel I posted when I announced we were doing Bridgerton on my Instagram
Mm,
is the
mhm.
the scene from the book and then the scene from the show. And like she just says no in the book, and then in the show there's
Yeah.
this whole we think she got shot and she falls off the horse thing. It's
Insane.
intense.
Insane. They don't need to do that.
Right. Yeah. And again, like you
I'm
said,
like,
it's a drama, so they have to add the shock value.
but do they have to make her dumb? I mean, I
I
think that
know.
the Duke, like, I don't, whatever. I think that there's a lot of martyrdom that happens in general in the show, where people are acting so dramatically because they're like just trying to make things more dramatic, and it just makes them martyrs. And so it's like a little bit of an eye roll, but that's kind of the point of a drama series, is to do things like that. So whatever,
Mhm.
we can move on from this.
Well, do you want to talk about like the honeymoon and everything, or do you kind of want to get into Simon's secret and her finding out and then
Well,
her betrayal and the differences between the book and the
yeah.
show?
I mean, I guess that's fine, because I think that the way that they did the wedding was pretty good in the show, especially because obviously it is a drama. And so I think that at that point, to me, that's when the acting felt more believable.
Okay.
Um where and also it felt more empathetic and more realistic, I guess, where you as the audience member, you could put yourself into either one of their shoes, where like they have made a decision that's uncomfortable for both of them, on
Mm,
Daphne's end and on the Duke's end. And so
mhm,
seeing that wedding, and everybody knows a wedding is like a big deal, getting married is a big deal. And so I feel like that is when things start to become more believable, I guess, for their acting, and maybe the way that that's written or the directing. But yeah, so I feel like that's fine. Really dramatic the way that they did it, of course, but I think it was fine, because in the show that it's kind of, you know, it's a little bit more lighthearted, but that's still a pretty intense point of the book. What did I
mhm.
say? Whatever I said. You guys know what I said. The book. The book is
Um,
lighthearted, but it's still sad, what the decision that they're making.
well, fast forward, they're learning how to live together. They're experiencing life together and settling into this new chapter of their lives. And she's learning how to be the lady of the house. And she is having a conversation with the head maid or whatever that position is. And that's when she learns more about his childhood. And I believe that's when she finds out about the process of making a child. And in the show, okay, in the book, okay, the book is a little bit more controversial than the show. In the book, Daphne has sex with him while he's passed out after drinking too much. And then in the show, she just doesn't let him go and he finishes without being able to release himself elsewhere. Sorry to get so real on the podcast. Um, so do you think that they made a good call not being as controversial as the book made it?
No, because I think that the way that the book is written, even though like it's not okay, nothing that either of them have done for this aspect of their relationship is okay. Where Simon Simon was upfront about not wanting children, and not wanting that to be a part of his life, but he
Was
obviously
he?
lied to her.
Uh-huh.
I will say Daphne went into this knowing
Knowing.
that
Yeah.
children was not something. And so it's like you can't fully feel bad for her or blame him
Mhm.
when she knew what she was getting into. And he was, and as he has said, he was planning to duel to make sure that it didn't happen
Right.
again, totally murdering himself and making it way more dramatic. But also that's kind of Britain in the 1800s, right? Is like
Right.
everybody's like feeling so sorry for themselves, and society is so dramatic about everything. But you can't really blame Simon for it, because Daphne
Mhm.
knew what she was getting into. However, you can't really blame Daphne for being completely betrayed, because
Of course not.
what yeah. So already both of them have not acted appropriately. So in my mind, the what Daphne did in the book is like it's still believable, like even though it's controversial, like
Mhm,
you can
mhm.
see, you can put yourself in her position where, he's not totally passed out, right?
Well,
He
he's
is
enjoying himself, but
drunk.
he's not he's not
He's
cognitive
not
of what is
sober.
happening. Right.
He's not
Um,
sober enough to be able to like put a stop to it like he normally would, and she knew that and took advantage of it. But that's,
right.
if you can put yourself in her position of being really desperate, you can understand her thought process for
Right, and
doing
it's
that,
not the same
but
it's
it's not
not the
okay.
same as today. Like, back then, they probably didn't even have a word for rape like we do today,
Yeah.
and it's, the whole Me Too movement and everything. So
Yeah.
I don't think she understood what she was doing was wrong like we would today, knowing like, "Oh my gosh, what she's
Correct.
doing is not okay."
Correct.
But yeah, so I
But
definitely
reading
see
it,
where you
well, and I do actually like that was in the book, because she's such a likable character
Mhm,
overall, and that made her unlikable. I feel like
mhm.
that was when you're reading it, you're like, "Whoa, what?" Like she was
Yeah.
so likable up until that, and so I like that was added in, because it wasn't out of character
Well, she's a flawed
necessarily.
character, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, and so I actually like that the book had that more controversial aspect, especially, again, like you just said, for our modern times, for how we would view something like that, because it did give her a major flaw, and it made her more real rather than
Mhm.
just being like this perfect fun character.
And she did feel a lot of guilt afterwards, did she not, in the
Yeah.
book?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
And then and I think that on his end, like, I think that the way that they portrayed it in the show was really similar to what happened in the book, so it was just mainly
like
Daphne's
the
part
anger, the
that
hurt,
was
and the
changed.
betrayal. Mhm.
But what I think was, um, again, different from the book to the screen and better in the book, is that very soon after their marriage, from my, recollection, is when, um, Daphne finds out about him not wanting to have children. Oh, wait, no. She finds out that he doesn't want to have children. He doesn't want to have children because of what happened in his past. He's choosing to not have children, and then that's when she does the thing, the
I don't
drunken.
think she knows why, but
Well,
she finds out that
I'm
he's choosing not to. And she
right.
knows
I think
about
it's
the
more.
past.
Yeah, I think it's more it's not the full story, but I think it's more explicit in the book, as far as like that her, the two of them have had a conversation about it, whereas in the show she finds out from one of the maids that he's doing something wrong, he is intentionally pulling out, and she didn't know what that meant before. And so I think that, right, in the show she finds out from the maid that he has to
Definitely in
spill
the
his seed
show.
into her,
I
and
thought
then she
the
immediately does that. But I
I
think in the
thought the
book
book
they have a
too, but
conversation.
it might be after.
I
I
thought.
thought the maid, because have seen the show and then read the book for this podcast, and wanna say the maid thing happened. They had a conversation. I just don't remember, because
Well,
I
I
remember
think
her mom didn't
that
wanna tell her
happens.
anything, and that happened in both. And I do know that the maid told her the history,
Mhm.
and I wanna say that's how she found out, because the maid was, like, very embarrassed or
Well, like, because I think that those
uncomfortable.
the conversations between her and the maid does happen, but I think that she confronts Simon, and he says
Yeah, you might be
he
right.
doesn't give
And
her
there's,
the
like, a
full
big
story, but I
argument, and
think
that's
that
why
they have
he's
a.
drinking.
Yes,
I
and
think
then
you're
that's when she
right.
takes advantage. So again, for me,
Yes.
that makes it more believable of a plot point, rather
Right.
than her, and then that turns it into like that's a flawed character moment, what she then does with that
Right.
information,
Because she does it in the heat of the moment, she's angry and betrayed, and then she
rather
realizes she
than
can take advantage
her.
of the situation.
Right,
Mhm.
rather than speculating from what the maid says, not even talking to him about it at all, which not that she shouldn't feel betrayed, but it's like in the show, she doesn't actually have any information. She just hears the maid talking about that, and she doesn't talk to him at all about
Oh,
it, and then
yeah.
forces him to spill his seed in her. And it's like, to me, that's like, well, okay, it adds more realistic depth to their relationship the way that it's portrayed in the book.
Mhm.
Still
Mhm.
both of them doing wrong stuff, but it makes
Yeah.
it more
Well, I mean,
believable.
it's a huge hurdle they're gonna have to cross to heal their
Yeah.
relationship after that. I mean, because 'cause
Yes.
they've both majorly betrayed each other,
Yeah.
and they're married. Um,
Whoops.
yes.
Luckily, they're
Well,
both rich
anyway,
and they both have like gigantic mansions in
right,
multiple
and
cities. So,
they kiss and they make up after pages and pages and scenes, and we conclude with a happily ever after, and they end up having a baby. So it all
Mhm.
ends well. Is there any other before we get into some of the added drama arcs of the show, is there anything else from the book that you want to talk about that the show did well or not so well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what the show did well was like when she miscarries essentially, right? Because she's
Oh,
not
yes.
bleeding and then she does start bleeding, and I think that the way that they portrayed that in the show was good because she's losing a lot of blood. Like, just FYI for people who have never seen menstrual blood, that was a lot that was suddenly coming out of her, and you could see that she was in anguish emotionally but also physically when that was happening. So I thought that the show did that well to show that pain of what so many women or, child
Mhm.
bearers um go through, and it's not talked about very much, and it's definitely not shown on a screen very often at all.
Mhm.
So in something as popular as the Bridgerton series, I think that that was really good to even show a little bit of that. So I like that, and then that goes along, in my opinion, with a lot of the other things that the show did really well, like the diversity, which we've talked about and we will continue talking about as long as we're discussing the show. um, so I think that was really good to make sure that that was included. And then for the rest of their relationship, I do feel like, for that portion of the season, I feel like the acting was really good, and the way that their chemistry was more believable. The anger that they had toward each other was really believable, even,
Mhm.
excuse me, even if it was dramatized and made really intense.
I've written down 3 added character plots that the show included, which is Antony, Colin and Marina, and Queen Charlotte. And we've kind of already touched base on Queen Charlotte a little bit. I don't think we need to discuss any more there. But Antony has a whole lot more character development. And then Colin has a relationship with an entirely new, created for the show character in Marina. So, which would you like to talk about first?
Let's talk about Antony.
Okay.
I didn't really mind his relationship with the what's her name? Um okay, well, the opera singer.
Sienna.
Thank you. Okay, so Sienna, I think to me that fit well with his character and added depth because he cared about her. And so like at first he was, kind of shown as being a rake, and which he is in the book too. Like he's a rake, and um so that, I think that that's fine that he's portrayed that way, but I like that there was that added dimension to his character where like he really likes this woman that's his mistress essentially, and seeing her side of it and what she has to go through, I really liked that. Again, I don't think it matters if it was Antony or not. I think that that was an interesting side plot. Regardless, she's an interesting
Mhm.
character, and she's not the type of character that's usually shown, right? Because she's just the opera singer. She's somebody that is, her body essentially is used for the men in high society, and so to have her be not at the forefront as in she's a main character, but like a strong side character, and have a whole plot for herself or her relationship. I really like that they added that in. And if it wasn't Antony, if it was somebody else, I still think it would have been an interesting storyline to include. But of course, because Antony is a main character and he's a Bridgerton, that, makes it
Mhm.
richer or whatever. So I don't think that that really took away from his character. And I think that because the Bridgertons in the books are so likable, the way that they portrayed him with this relationship kept him likable because it showed that he cared. It showed that he was a rake, but he still had depth to him and he still was a caring person. Whereas the way that they showed Benedict in this season was like not, he did not make him likable, in my opinion. And his part was a lot smaller than Antony's.
Mhm.
So that being said, oh, my doggy's little tappy tap foots are coming into the room. Okay, anyways, I think I'm done talking about Antony. That's how I feel about his side relationship.
Well, and I do think the fact that they make him care about her makes the next season a little bit more believable, because if he was just shown as this womanizer and then all of a sudden he falls in love with this woman, it's like where's the development there? So it is nice that they included that. You are correct.
Agreed. Yeah.
So let's talk about Colin and Marina. And what are your thoughts on the addition of
It's
Marina?
so okay. So many thoughts just went into my head. Colin and Marina, not believable. The way that they portrayed that relationship, the whole time I'm like, why is this here for these two characters? Because they are not making it believable. And so again, maybe that was a writing and directing issue. Maybe it was an acting issue. I think Marina's a fantastic actor. I think that perhaps the way that they directed Colin was not very believable. Like he wasn't as believable as a character because I don't think that he's necessarily a bad actor. So I think I don't know, but I think I was every time they would come on screen, I would be like, no, I don't believe at all that this is happening. I don't believe their feelings for each other. I don't
Mm.
believe any of this. And it kept coming out of nowhere. But the addition of Marina as a character, I think, was fascinating. I think that was great. But again, didn't need to be with a Bridgerton because that
Yeah.
made Colin not seem, I don't know, it just, maybe if it was portrayed better, then it would make more sense. I don't know. To me, it wasn't great because then also setting it up for when he's going to have his love that he meets, it's not going to make sense to me because and also it's like we didn't see Colin and Marina enough to justify them being so in love with each other. Like Colin was so in love with her
Right.
and said when him and Marina had their final conversation and he was like, if you had told me at the beginning, I would have married you without hesitation. It's like, what? No, you wouldn't have. Like, you didn't even talk to her. We didn't see you guys talk at all. He didn't talk about his feelings for her to like anybody else in, his siblings or whatever. Only very briefly did he do that. And for a Bridgerton to marry somebody who is already pregnant in that time period, there is absolutely no way that that would have happened. And so it just felt so crazy to me that they added that in and thought that it would be believable. That being said, I thought Marina was fantastic. I thought the acting was great. And I like the idea of that added scandal and drama in the show. So I think that that part of it was great. That was a really cool plot point to add in. It just should not have been with Colin Bridgerton.
Hmm. Do you think that it should have been with either Antony or Benedict, or just not a Bridgerton at all?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess maybe I would like to see, it would be
The
fun to see how the writers, if they could like do a mini series almost with like comparing it the same thing with Antony and then the same thing with Benedict. Like if we could get that to see like if the chemistry could be built in a different way or if they could
Sure.
tweak the writing. Um
The reason I ask is because the show is clearly called Bridgerton. So they are the
yeah.
characters. So every kind of story arc needs to kind of relate back to them.
But does
And
it?
yeah. Well, I mean, they have some storylines that, well, yeah,
Because like
like they are the main,
the bartender
right,
and
but
his
you're
fighting is
friends with them, right? Aren't they betting on him or something? And don't
but
they?
but I don't think the Bridgertons have anything to do with that whole plot point.
Okay.
To me, that is like a fantastic plot point to add
Side.
in as side
Mhm.
story because it's interesting, it's especially with a grounded character like that, where he's not a member of high society. And so he's
I was
more
just about to say
believable.
it's like the contrast between high society and the
Mhm.
Bridgertons and like the underground.
And I like that. I think that the connection with their side story and the boxing and the gambling or whatever, or not the gambling, but the
Yeah,
betting,
the gambling.
that those characters and that plot point and the connection that they have is because he's such good friends with Simon. I think that's perfect because that's believable that they would be really good friends, especially like Simon being really good friends with somebody who's not a member of high society. But it doesn't like do anything to Simon's plot, which is his relationship with
Right.
Daphne, other than if they have a conversation about what's going on. And so to me, that's great. And then like the queen, like we discussed earlier, her as an added character is great because she does such a good job with it. It makes it interesting. It gives her like it adds depth to the overall society or the community of the people. But she doesn't necessarily. The issues become when she has the diamond of the season and she chooses Daphne, and then with Eloise investigating Lady Whistledown, even though I don't think that they totally botched it, that wasn't necessarily, it didn't need to be Eloise. It could have been somebody else
Mhm.
and it still would have been interesting. And so I think that this, and like the Featheringtons, their money issue that was mentioned in the books, but like not to that they expanded on it more in the show from my memory. And I thought
Yes,
it was
very much
so
so.
interesting. Super interesting. But again, doesn't
Does he
take
even
away.
die in the book?
I think so.
Okay.
But it doesn't have anything really to do with the Bridgertons,
Mhm.
except for Eloise and Penelope being friends. But the
Right.
show ruins the Penelope and Eloise friend. I don't think it, again, they don't have a very believable friendship the way that they do in the books, but we don't see too much of that in this season because that's not a huge part of the first book, so that kind of makes sense. But the Featheringtons have a really interesting plot line on the side, and it doesn't have anything to do with the Bridgertons. And I think it still works. So I think that they could have done that with Marina and had her
Mhm.
be with one of the other members of high society, maybe that's really good friends with the Bridger. Maybe he's really good friends with Antony or something like
Well,
that.
let me ask you this.
Okay.
Do you think that it does anything to set up their relationship? Because Penelope is so against it because she has feelings for Colin already and she's trying to save
Hmm.
him. And so it kind of plants the seeds for their relationship 2 seasons from now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know that's why they did it, obviously. But I think it's unnecessary how far they went with it, and they
Mhm.
make
Okay.
it not believable. Whereas what you and it also makes Penelope not likable in my mind. The way that she's portrayed in the show, it makes her, you can understand like most of us have had some type of unrequited love or
Mhm.
betrayal from a friend because we like somebody or something. Like most of us have been through some type of something that Penelope's experiencing, so we can put ourselves in her shoes and we can understand like
Right.
that desperation. But it makes her not a, like, we don't get enough time with her before that happens, I think, to make her a likable character, and then we see her going through this pain. I think we get a
That's
little bit of
fair.
time with her and she's likable at the beginning, but it's not enough time before she turns into like this crazy mess. And we're like, we don't even know her. We don't know that much about her history with Colin. Like if they had showed more
Sure.
of her history with him and all of this, so then we really feel for Penelope, that would make more sense. So them adding this into the first season, the only reason that they did it is because they wanted the Marina plot point.
Do
Because
you
it,
think there
yeah.
were too many storylines in the show?
Yeah. And again, I think that if they had them be purely side plots, not trying to pull the Bridgertons into it all, and focused more on Daphne and Simon's storyline and then had like the separate plot points, I think that they'd still be able to flesh out the characters, flesh out the side plots and make it more cohesive. But I don't think that the main plot point of Daphne and Simon made sense enough and felt cohesive enough for them to be able to add in all of these other plot points. So, no, I don't
Right.
think that they did a good job with it. But I think that they have the right idea, and I think it's really interesting what they're doing. So they should have,
Not to
yeah,
get too ahead of ourselves, but do you think seasons 2 and 3 did better
no.
with the okay.
But
So
also I will be curious how I feel now that you and I are like heavily analyzing it. And so the next time that I watch the
mm,
seasons to refresh my memory, having this in like these types of conversations that you and I are having that in mind, I'd be really curious to see how my opinion would change.
yes, same because I've seen 2 and 3, and so I need to read books 2 and 3, but then I'm going to try to read book 4 before season 4, and so I'm going to have the last what are there, 7?
There's
7
8
total books?
books and
8
8,
books.
well, but also they did the seasons out of order from the books.
Oh my goodness. Wait, so how should I read the books?
I would have to like, I think that you should do one and, well, you read one. So two and then four and then three.
Okay,
But
but would reading book 4 spoil book
yeah, so I don't remember. So I
but I've
will
seen season oh my
you're
gosh,
gonna
wait a
have to
minute.
wait for me to
You're
rewatch
gonna
and
have to do
reread
some
everything.
research for me.
I'm gonna have to do some
Okay.
research for you, especially you won't be rewatching these quite yet, right? You have other adaptations that you're going to be covering first.
Several. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
so then there's some time. So I'll do some research before we get to that. And then they haven't even announced when they're doing the next season. I feel like when they announce what the next season is, because it was a shock when they did the season 3 and the storyline that was in it. I remember being like, "What? Hold on."
Because so Colin is book 4.
um, yes,
Okay. So book 3 is who?
Benedict.
Oh, okay.
So when
I
the
like that they
trailer
set up Go ahead, go ahead.
when the trailer comes out for the next season, I feel like that will be
Even
indicative.
beforehand, because they had done, like, photo shoots, the 2 of them, and so you kind of got the idea that it was going to be their season.
Yeah, and so once we know what the collective we once we know what the next TV season is going to be about, who the main characters are going to be, then that will determine like which book would make sense to what the sequence or
Sure.
the order. Anyways,
Well,
but season 2 and
yes.
book 2 should be fine.
Question of the hour. Which medium told the story better, or did both succeed in their own ways?
Okay, well, I could feel you laughing as you said that. The book did a much better job of telling the story.
I do like that the books are just very quick beach reads, like, yes,
Delightful,
there's 8 of them,
fun.
but just get the story in, find out about this particular Bridgerton
They're
and their
good.
romance story and move on to the next one.
And they're just fun. They're
But
way more lighthearted.
they are, well, the one that I have read. Um, I do think that the show does a good job of being a drama, which is what
Yes.
it is. It's a Shondaland, so it's very much a Shondaland show. And I think that I do like the added stories. I was very surprised to see no Marina, no Queen Charlotte, especially because I watched the show Queen Charlotte before reading the book. So to see her not even be a character was rather shocking. But I did like the book better, although I do think the show does what it set out to do.
That's a correct way to describe them.
Well, I like to end the adaptation discussions with bookmarked moments, which are the moment you liked best about the adaptation. So, what did the adaptation do the best? What is your least favorite aspect of the movie adaptation? And what's a moment from the book or the film that really stands out to you? What are your bookmarked moments?
Um, my first bookmark is that in general, I think that the side plots are great additions to the show.
Mhm.
Um, or to the overall story. What I don't like. Um, well, keeping along with there's so many moments that stand out to me that it's hard to gather my thoughts at the moment. But I would say that overall, just that so many of the character things for the main characters are not believable. It's like the side characters are more believable with their issues and their struggles and their relationships. than the Bridgertons, which it's called the Bridgertons. So
Hmm.
don't like
Mhm.
that. And something that really stands out in the show, right? The show.
Either or.
Um, I really like the diversity and
Mm,
um and how the show's not afraid to tackle things that are controversial or not talked about very often on the
1000%.
screen. So I like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. Which is why it's kinda surprising that they changed Daphne's portrayal.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shonda, what are you thinking is what I want to say to her for a lot of the stuff. I mean, in so many ways it's so good, but in so many ways it's not. So it's interesting. But I will continue watching the show as it comes out.
Yes, of course, because I need you to come on the
Yeah,
podcast.
happily.
Well, Megan, where can people find you on the interwebs? And thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I can't wait to have you on for book 2, season 2.
Yes, of course. I'm so happy to be here. And you can find me on the interwebs, mainly on Instagram at Megan, Megan _ Lachowski, Lachowski. And normally I would say I have other projects that you can follow from there, but my main other thing that I'm doing is dance, teaching dance, and that's local. So if you want to watch anything to do with that, that is linked in my page. But otherwise, I'm not really doing any other interweb creative projects at the moment.
Well, you definitely want to check out her dance stuff because she's amazing at what she does. So go follow her. And listeners, thank you for joining us for another page to screen adaptation episode. It was a lot of fun, and we will see you next week. That's a wrap for today's episode of Book Watch. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the world of page to screen adaptations. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share it with your fellow book and movie lovers. If you'd prefer to watch along, you can check the show out on YouTube. You can follow the show on Instagram at Bookwatch Podcast, and you can follow me, Sarah-Daye, on Instagram at captain.mcdee. That's MCDEE. You can also join the conversation in the Bookwatch Lounge on Facebook at www.facebook.com/groups/bookwatchlounge. If you would like to support the podcast, you can join the Patreon at www.patreon.com/bookwatchpodcast. Tiers start at only $4 a month, and I'd love to have you over there. If you have a favorite adaptation you'd like to cover with me, I'd love for you to apply to be on the show with the contact form on our website at www.bookwatchpodcast.com. Until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and I'll see you next week.